Users of Reddit, what's the worst I hate to break it to you moment you've had with someone? I had a guy working for me that was extremely nice, easy to get along with, and wildly inept. Not even like low effort, but just not capable of learning seemingly basic tasks. We tried everything. Coaching, giving him legitimate checklist instructions, having a team lead sit with him for a couple weeks to walk him through basics. Everything. Everyone said the same thing, he just couldn't do the job. Everything he did had to be double checked by somebody else, which meant that we might as well have somebody else do it. But everyone liked the guy. They thought he was easygoing and cool to be around, everything. But still, he just straight up couldn't do that job. So I had to find another place for him in the company that would better match his skills. The option would be for him to either take the lower job with lower pay, or he would be fired with severance. I was not looking forward to the conversation. I called him in for a one-on-one to break it to him, and the first thing he started with was, "Hey boss, before we start, I just want to tell you that I really feel like I've been doing a great job here, and I would like to talk about a raise." Yeah, that conversation was not a fun one. I had a similar instance in my career where the person legitimately was working harder than anyone else to try and learn and contribute. Everyone saw her as the first to show up, the first to volunteer, attending conferences on weekends to improve skills, and basically working on improvement constantly. As the one reviewing her work and attempting to give her additional training constantly, it became a huge burden on me trying to get her to some level of competency and failing to even get her to complete basic tasks without coaching constantly. I had to break it to her that we couldn't keep her on the team. She cried a lot about how she was working harder than everyone else and she didn't understand why this was happening. She got angry when I tried to give her some parting constructive criticism that she was asking for, and stormed off screaming that the group couldn't function without her and that we were going to realize all she really did after she was gone. It was so hard thinking of how much easier it would be with her gone. She really was a hard worker, really was dedicated, really gave it more effort than anyone else. She just wasn't capable of doing the job. Stories like these are proof that people who have learning disabilities or stuff like ADHD, telling them to just work harder or that they are just not trying hard enough doesn't work. Sometimes people simply lack the ability. It's like telling a person with bad eyesight to just try harder to see. No, it doesn't work. They need glasses or surgery. If you can't provide them with glasses or eye surgery, you can't just make them see by telling them to try harder. Further, someone who is blind, was born blind, or is blind now simply cannot be made to see no matter what accommodations you provide. I tried factory work for the first time during COVID. No matter how hard I tried, I could not physically move fast enough to keep up with everybody else on my line, so I quit. It was just something I couldn't do. Some people are unable to learn. That's just all there is to it. Nobody is equal to anyone else. The idea is insane in itself. I wouldn't say it has to do with ADHD or anything else like that. It is just a fact across all people. Some are unable to do something others can. That's as simple as it is. The world isn't equal. Not everyone can do everything. What's wrong with that, though? It's a tough concept to get over because so many of us are sold on the idea of a pure meritocracy. If you work hard and smart, you will achieve. And those who don't achieve, therefore, aren't working hard enough or smart enough. Except disabled folk, of course. We prefer not to think about them. I'm a scientist and software engineer with ADHD, oddly enough, and I found this consistently throughout my time mentoring and tutoring more junior developers. Some people just do not and will not get it when it comes to certain things. I've tutored a guy who just could not code. 3 years in, couldn't figure out what a comment was. I met another who had similar issues with electricity. I've met someone who cannot take averages or make estimates without having all the data in a spreadsheet. I have a similar blind spot, most likely tied to ADHD, with punctuality and timeliness. There is no set of tools or calendars or mental exercises or alarms that will consistently help me be aware of how long something is taking or intuitively tell me, oh, it's time to go when I need to leave. My time management is seemingly incorrigible. I don't know if it's an aspect of upbringing or education or whether it's just natural anti-talent, but it's definitely a real thing, and we've spent an awful lot of time telling people that it isn't. The person could not figure out a comment is a line of words in code that do not affect the code itself, but communicate the code's intent to the programmer and other members of their team who may be working on it as well. They could not understand this? Genuinely, yes. They were attempting to follow a tutorial in a new language and asked me to help debug, and they couldn't figure out why the English language explanation they pasted into the editor wasn't compiling. The longer explanation is a little more sympathetic. This person was autistic and was in their 7th year of study towards a 3-year degree. They weren't generally incompetent and could do a bunch of stuff like business analysis and web design, and they could rote learn how to write in particular languages, but the underlying concepts of programming eluded them entirely. They should have been kicked out a long time beforehand, but the institution were too cowardly to do so. My best friend in high school was overweight and would sweat profusely. We would come in after lunch in Texas and he would smell awful. I think he would wear his clothes without washing them after sweating. We had English after and the AC sucked, so the teacher put a fan in the window. He would sit in front of the fan and blow his funk over everyone. The class got together and voted that I should be the one to tell him. Well, I had to break it to him that for the last year he has smelled horribly. I felt pretty bad, but he never stunk again. I was this friend. I'm anosmic, which means I don't have a sense of smell, and was brought up poor, so never learned how to take care of myself. One day my freshman year in college, someone pulled me aside and told me and was like, "Sorry, I hate to be the one to break it to you." And I was like, well, I think you're actually a better friend or person than everyone else because you actually told me there was a problem so I could fix it. I wouldn't feel bad if I were you. A friend had to do this with a roommate. The roommate did big hours and a manual job at night shift. She would come home and go straight to bed. I've never worked night shift, but I would assume you need to eat, unwind, have a shower, and then go to bed. She basically came straight out and said, "You stink." The girl was so horrified she never stunk again. Sometimes you have to be cruel to be kind. This is why when I worked in food service, I'd shower after shift, not in the morning. You'll stink to high heaven when you're done work. Also weird to try to sleep all greasy and grody. I'm an auto mechanic. I shower at night. Sometimes it's not until right before I go to bed, but I never go to bed dirty. That's just insanely gross. Some of my coworkers did the opposite and went to bed dirty and showered in the morning. I once asked the guy who worked next to me what color his sheets were, and he said they used to be white, and now they're dark gray. Oof. Definitely the time I had to tell a friend that the business opportunity he was so excited about was actually a pyramid scheme. He was so hyped, talking about how he was going to quit his job and be his own boss. I tried to ease into it, but there's really no soft way to say, "Hey man, you're about to lose a lot of money and ruin your friendships." I had a roommate who had lunch with an old college buddy one time who told him about this great business venture he could join and gave him a lot of the details of it, including some paperwork. His friend told him several times, it's not a multi-layer marketing scheme, or MLM. It was for Amway, you know, one of the earliest MLMs. How did he take it? Not OP, but I have had friends who have done the same thing. They just think you don't get it, or rather that they are different and will actually sell a lot and find a lot of people to buy in under them. The problem with convincing people that it's a scam is the fact that they technically can make a lot of money in it. If they manage to sell a lot of product, or manage to convince a lot of people to sell product, they would make some good money. But the reality is, hardly anyone wants the product, and hardly anyone you convince to work under you is going to sell very much, if at all. Some people will spend a ton of money on Google Ads, car decals, and business cards to really try to make it work. If they are somewhat successful, they actually do make money back, but it's usually less than what they spent to get it. So they get trapped even more thinking that eventually it will pay off and keep sinking in more money. But for the friends that just naturally suck at selling and convincing, they will figure out on their own that they can't possibly make it work and they are out of it pretty quick. The maths should be enough to convince them. Sadly, it often doesn't. Yup. Hey man, just to make $5,000 a month, which is what you would need to live somewhat comfortably, would require about 50 sales per month, or about 200 people under you making one sale. Yeah, exactly. It's easy. I can do that. Okay then. How much have you sold so far? Well, nothing so far, but I just got started and I am working on a plan. You started 2 months ago. Yeah, I've been busy. Busy with what? Look, you don't get it, bro. Just fuck off if you're gonna be a hater. I used to work in a customer care call center for a major telecommunications company. A woman called in one day to inquire about two $99 charges on her bill from Lava Life. She kept pressing about the charges, what they were, and I had to explain to her that Lava Life is a dating service and that the charges were legitimate. If she didn't make them, did someone else live in her house who might have? There was only her husband, and I heard her go from, but he would never, to, I have to go now, as it said it. That was almost 20 years ago now, and I still feel awful about it. I work at a bank, and recently one of my coworkers was helping a member trying to figure out what a charge was. It was for a salon, which neither her or her husband went to, coming from his card on a day when he was supposed to be on a business trip. Edit. Definitely wasn't stolen. Our system will tell us if a transaction happened online, through POS, etc. It was with a card, at the city local salon, and the husband still had the card. My husband passed, and like 3 weeks later, his account was charged for like $3,000 in a sporting goods store in Texas. We live in Florida. I called the store. It was spent on 2 canoes, which he definitely didn't buy. He was dead, and his cards, including debit, which they somehow used. The bank refunded all the money and said that this happens all the time. After someone dies, there's people that look at obituaries and find dead people, and then steal their identities, and get bank cards out of it somehow. It's crazy what these scammers can do nowadays. Having to tell a student who was almost totally blind that she likely couldn't be an ER nurse. She and her dad moved to our district, and at the Individual Education Plan, or IEP, her dad starts talking about how he can't wait for Sue to go to nursing school. I frantically scanned my brain, trying to think of how someone who was going to need Braille would be able to do that job. Then Sue piped up to say that her dream was to be an ER nurse. Her prior district told her she could do anything, including this. She had a degenerative disease that would eventually make her blind. I talked to my friends who are nurses, I talked to our career lady at the school, I researched, but there just wasn't any way someone who couldn't see could be an ER nurse. I reconvened the IEP and had to explain this. I know both were in denial, but I was not happy that the prior district pumped up this idea. I mean, sure, there's lots she could still do, but that just wasn't one of them. Then another student came from the same district with the idea she could be a crime scene investigator. She was also nearly blind. I taught students with severe and profound needs for a couple of years. One of my students, who had an intellectual disability and severe epilepsy that could not be controlled by medication, was set on being in the military. All the staff encouraged it and would even set him up to chat with recruiters, knowing full well he could not be in the military. I pissed a lot of my aides off when I sat with him and had him research qualifications for joining the military. He understood how severe his epilepsy was and that he could not be in the military with his epilepsy. He cried, but then he was able to move past it and picked an attainable goal. I even set him up with an internship at the local bike shop to pursue it. When I write IEPs, I ask students for their dream job and their backup plan. If they want to be musicians, singers, YouTubers, football players, etc., I ask what they'll do to support themselves while pursuing those dreams. I definitely feel like a bad guy at times, but I feel like it's necessary. You're doing God's work. I had 5 buddies who were in special needs that killed themselves out of the despairing, depressive states they ended up in after life gave them a reality check, because they kept being hyped up by the most important people around them their whole lives, to the point they fully blindly believed it, so they never had any semblance of a backup plan. I tried so hard at advising them to be more realistic, but every single person made me out to be the bad guy for trying to crush their dreams, essentially driving me out of these guys' lives. Hearing out what ended up happening to them years down the line was gut-wrenching every single time. Oh my god, that is so sad. Thank you for sharing that story. There is a young woman in my life who I'm afraid of that happening to. She has been coddled all her life, is celebrated for the tiniest milestone, and acts like a toddler. I have no doubt that she is capable of more, based on some of the things she says and accomplishes on her own, but nobody challenges her. When she turns 18 in a few years, what then? 15 years ago, my friend's father sadly passed away shortly after we graduated college. It was devastating for him. He figured he'd at least get a nice money boost to help him get back on his feet, but unfortunately, his father kept it a secret that he was in deep, deep debt and had no liquid cash to his name. My friend had no support and fell into a terrible depression. He was broke, he couch crashed with me and our friends for a while, he quit his job, and he got comfortable with this new lifestyle. 2 years later, he's still spending a month here and there with various friends around the city, eating their food, occupying their couch, sipping off their booze cabinet, using the terrible, tragic passing of his father as his reasoning for being the way he was. It had been 2 years. We understood the pain he felt was real, but it was really time for him to actually get back on his feet and take care of himself. We didn't know how to explain it to him, but we all felt he was taking advantage of us and was using his father's death as an excuse to just not get a job. I found him a job. A nice one he would be good at, he went to school for, and didn't need prior work experience. I talked to a team lead and a human resources rep and got him a contact line for them, basically assuring an interview and a job offer if he arrived on time and sober. Weeks later, my HR rep and this team lead were confused, thinking I didn't relay the information to him. He never called. I gave him a layup of a job opportunity and he just ignored it outright. I called him out on it, but he told me to calm down and chill out and that I wasn't being sensitive to his depression and I wasn't understanding of his needs. So my worst, I hate to break it to you moment, wasn't actually with him. It was with all my friends afterward. I had to tell them all to turn him down every time he asked to stay a week at their place. It sucked. The timing and my response to his refusal would give it away. This guy knew I was the horrible jerk who turned all his friends against him and denied him free room and board. Hell, I was probably going to be the sole reason he'd blame for his inevitable descent into homelessness. I accepted the burden and called them up, explaining I had a job lined up for him and he refused, and we must all stop giving him a free place to stay if he won't take an easy job. Yes, it sucks his dad died, and it sucks he didn't get any kind of inheritance to start his life proper. It sucks he felt this terrible depression that lingered for years, and most of all, it sucks he had a group of enabling friends like me who humored it for so long, it just became his accepted norm. We failed him. He didn't end up homeless though. Without us offering his jobless butt a couch to crash on anymore, he ended up moving in with his aunt. Apparently she didn't take his excuses, didn't put up with his laziness, and did all the things we should have been doing all along. No booze allowed, no weed, no gaming after she went to bed. She only had one TV in the house and it was for Food Network only. He got a job developing 3D assets for virtual reality titles and started moving up and up creating VR experiences for architecture companies. Dude still hates me probably, and I'll admit I made mistakes to justify it, but I'm really grateful his aunt was there. I did what I needed to do, but it would have been even 10 times worse if he did end up living on the streets, still blaming his father's sudden death for his 2-decade-long predicament. You guys did the right thing. Thanks. I'm omitting a lot of stuff just to get to the point. In hindsight, we weren't really good friends to him. I feel we didn't do enough to curb his alcoholism when he was depressed, even encouraging it with the belief of his dad died. He can have an extra shot if he wants. We also just really liked the guy. He wasn't really tough to have hanging around for several days at a time, and we always assured him he wasn't a burden, and we wouldn't ever ask anything of him so he could recover in the time he felt was right. Feel-good saccharine sentiments, for sure. Definitely reads well in a Reddit post. But keeping this up for several years, and offering him weed and booze to try to make him feel better instead of finding routes to therapy and job placement. Yeah, we were definitely fresh out of college then. We reeked of that mentality, and when his life was turned upside down, we weren't the people he needed. He needed a scary aunt who would yell at him all the time to find a job. Sounds crazy, but for people who have been in a situation of dire motivation and sloth, they know what I mean. Somebody who cares enough to not let others think it's okay. By the way, I dropped off his radar shortly after he moved in with her. I thought about him after posting that. Just checked out his LinkedIn page. He seems to be doing alright now. I'm proud of him. His dad would be proud of him. I had an employee who was a strict vegetarian for religious reasons. One day we were discussing the employee's salad bar and he mentioned how much he loved the Caesar dressing packets they offered. I was surprised and stupidly blurted out, "Oh, I didn't realize you ate fish." He responded that he was vegetarian and gave me a quizzical look. I had to explain that the salad dressing contained both fish and Parmesan cheese, which is almost always cultured with animal rennet. He didn't believe me, and the next day insisted on reading the ingredients on one of the packets to me to prove to me that I was wrong. Then he got to the anchovies and got quiet. I still feel awful that he had to find out that way. Neither of us handled the situation well. I knew someone whose new wife was vegetarian and praised Jack in the Box for having great tacos that taste real but are vegan. This was 2009 when the only tacos they had was beef and cheese. She was half his age and top heavy. He was middle-aged with a criminal record. He decided to keep that truth to himself. As a former vegetarian and knowing many vegetarians, this is something that will just inevitably happen unless you really read up and understand ingredient labels. It's amazing how many things contain animal products until you read the fine print. Yeah, you'd think something like strawberry yogurt would be okay for vegetarians who are fine with milk, and then you see cochineal on the ingredients list, look it up, and realize it's ground up insects used as a red dye in many foods and cosmetics. A friend of mine unironically thought that he was the first person ever to experience existentialism. He literally said that no one ever talks about how small we are in the grand scope of the universe, and kept saying that no one else ever wants to talk about the meaning of life. I felt too bad to explain to him that the concept of how small we are in relation to our world has literally been one of the backbones of philosophy for centuries. Related to that, I've had to explain to people that this is why, when you start philosophy in university, it is nothing but reading what other, usually very old, philosophers wrote, and then writing a paper to explain their views to prove you understand them, because none of the amazing ideas you have are new. No, not even that one. You need to learn about all the fundamental shit that people have already come up with, the responses to it, the responses to that, etc., so that you aren't continually reinventing the wheel. You can't get to any of the cutting-edge philosophy until you understand enough to stop reinventing Pascal's wager, and so on. No matter what people come up with, you can bet that it's already been thought about. Not just in philosophy either. I saw a great printout stuck on a chem professor's door that said, 2 months spent in the laboratory can frequently save 2 hours spent in the library. The reason is all the time, he'd have grad students running off to test something they'd come up with, and work hard, produce results, and be very pleased only for him to say, yes, that is true, and it was discovered in 1936 by Pauling, or the like. It's something I always try to impart to people, particularly smart people. Anytime you have what you think is a new, brilliant idea, see if someone else already had that idea. They might have, and they might have hit a roadblock, which is why it hasn't happened. Maybe not, or maybe you figure out a way around it, but it is worth your while to check as it may save you lots of time and embarrassment. I was doing a phone port with AT&T, and when we got done, the AT&T guy says, "Alright man, have a good weekend." I replied back with, "I hate to break it to you, bud, but it's only Tuesday." I heard him actually sigh and say, "fuck," under his breath. The realization, especially working retail, that it is not in fact the last work day of your week is crushing. But, man, I usually make that mistake on a Thursday, sometimes on a Wednesday, but a Tuesday? That would feel like the whole world is crashing down. Sister's a victim of her own impulsivity. She really likes new cars and will roll negative equity into a new car. Then she'll get bored of it, stop maintaining it, trade it in for a loss, and have an even bigger loan. And this was back when loans were pretty much free and they could finance anybody. So she called me up all excited because she found a new truck, got approved for financing, and was on the way to go buy it. So I went to meet her there. Big V8 full-size pickup truck. For a woman working part-time and living in a congested city. Why do you want this? My kids need a place to transport their bikes, and I want to go camping. So I test drove it with her. Salesman was doing everything in his power to make the sale, and fair enough, he's not a financial advisor. He doesn't need to deal with the fallout. But right there in the showroom, I had to tell her that, look, this is an awful idea. You can't afford this. It's going to be a huge burden on you, and you need to walk away. Thankfully, she did. Salesman would have punched me if he could have gotten away with it. He was seething mad. Good on you. I wish someone did that for me. Was stuck with a loan 3 times as big as it was supposed to be because I went by myself and the salesman upsold me on everything. 3 years later, I sold the car because I couldn't afford it anymore, and now I'm out of a vehicle. Unfortunately, it happens. I got screwed by a salesman once where I got suckered into buying a package I really didn't want. The thing is, they do this all the time, and we do it only once every few years, so they have the upper hand. So it's not unreasonable that things like that happen. And I think this is why they're freaking out when companies like Tesla are doing direct-to-consumer sales with no haggling now, because they thrive off customers not knowing what's what. I was at a tech entrepreneurial meetup back in 2012. I spoke with one guy who was enthusiastically describing his billion-dollar idea, an app that people at the gym could use to track their workouts and do challenges. He said there was even a social media potential because people could share their progress. You mean like Strava? I asked, thinking he had perhaps identified a niche market not covered by Strava, Endomondo, and others. I got a confused what in response. He'd never heard of it. The look on his face when I showed him the app and he saw that his idea had been thoroughly realized for some time was tragic. How he had gotten as far with his idea as he had without finding any existing apps is a mystery to me. Oh god. My boss's grandson is currently trying to get investment for an app where you get a 3D digital avatar that puts on muscle at the same rate as you. I'm sure there's someone out there who would want that, but not enough people to warrant the months of work he's put in. Like Wii Fit characters? Possibly. Never seen it. You did him an absolute solid. Every entrepreneur needs to start with a competitive analysis. I've gotten people come up to me with their billion-dollar ideas as well. Every time, there's already multiple companies out there with the same exact idea. I'm not sure why they don't do any research beforehand. I always feel like an asshole when I have to say, oh, like Company Z, and see the excitement drain from their faces. Look, they're good ideas. You're just years too late. The first thing you should do when you come up with a great business idea is to make sure that it's not already a thing. It takes 2 minutes, tops. Back around 2007, I had an older colleague who was excitedly flitting around the office telling everyone about some lottery she had won, and that she was going to quit just as soon as the $100,000 cleared in her account. Mary, we will call her, was only in her 50s, so still years away from retirement. On top of that, she was an administrative assistant at a non-profit, so we're not talking about a lucrative career where she was squirreling away funds for a rainy day. And here she was, ready to resign a decade early over a sum that would only be worth a few years of salary after taxes. Did I mention that there was talk of a fur coat? I would have normally kept my mouth shut. After all, her poor financial planning was none of my business, and frankly, I would not have missed her in the office. I was not a fan. I just couldn't be silent once she got to my office, though. It was obviously a scam. I'm not trying to rain on your parade, but are you absolutely sure this is legit? Oh yeah, I already gave them my banking information and everything. They're depositing the money today. You may want to call your bank just to be sure. No, it's fine. Okay, congrats. /S for sarcasm. Dear reader, not even an hour later I hear her screeching into her phone that, no, don't close my account. They're supposed to be depositing the money. Depositing. No, depositing. No, they're not taking it out. They're putting it in. My office mate and I just looked at each other like... Mary didn't say anything to anyone about the fraud. Edited to add, the bank calling her as a security measure saved her from getting cleaned out. The scammers didn't actually get her money. Epilogue. About a year later, a bunch of us, Mary and myself included, were laid off at the beginning of the recession. I didn't like Mary, but I didn't wish her unwell. I can only imagine how much harder it was for her to find work than us, 20 and 30-somethings who lost our jobs. I know the people laid off were cherry-picked based on who the founder didn't like. Question a process? Shit list. Do anything other than cheerlead the founder's ideas? Shit list. Run around the office talking about quitting? Mary absolutely landed on the shit list that day. She had been one of the first employees the org ever hired, and just like that, she was disposable. That's just horrible, oh my god. Having to listen to that phone call, yikes, how awkward. It really was. Thank God the bank called. They saved her ass when they did that despite her multiple, "you're mistaken" replies. Otherwise she would have been cleaned out. It still blows my mind how much info she gave them. She told them her account balance, for Christ's sakes. This is the same woman who was in charge of doing the bank runs for donations we got at the office. Zero critical thinking. My friend has been constantly complaining about her husband. I visited them for a couple of weeks and I had to break it to her that she is the problem, like massively so. I genuinely felt sorry for her husband by the time I left. The man gets both verbally and emotionally abused constantly. I told him he should report her to the police if she ever hit him again, because honestly, the situation is completely out of control. Even more out of control than she is, she needs a couple nights in jail to rethink her choices, to be honest. I had the opposite. Had a cousin complaining about how great their husband was and how guilty they felt for not being good enough, needing to be better for him, etc. Had to break it to her she was being abused and she was not the problem. He'd just broken her down into thinking she was and deserved it all. This happened to my brother-in-law. My sister had been abusing him for a long time and it caused him to have 2 strokes. She continued abusing him in his weak state, verbally, physically, emotionally, and psychologically. No one knew about this until my brother-in-law finally called some of his family members, including his son, and told them what was going on. He and my sister had been married for over 30 years and he had done everything and anything she wanted him to do. She is a gold digger. My sister is a chronic adulteress and has had many lovers while being married. One day while my sister and her boyfriend were in church, yeah, I know, my brother-in-law's family man-napped him. They grabbed everything that belonged to him and his son took him to live with him and his wife. My sister didn't find out until she went home and found my brother-in-law gone. No one has had any contact with my sister, and I especially won't have contact with her. She turned her back on me and our sick mother for years. My brother-in-law passed away while in hospice care, and my sister didn't even attend his funeral. She didn't post any condolences on his obituary either. I really liked my brother-in-law, and he was very kind, very intelligent, but gave in to my sister's whims, and no one understands why. He knew my sister had cheated on him numerous times, but still did nothing about it. Years ago, I had known about a couple of times my sister had cheated and called her out on it. I just couldn't understand why she would do it. A few of us saw that my sister put her house up for sale, and my eyeballs just about popped out of the sockets when I saw the house. It's huge. She's asking over $300K for it, and I guess it's worth it. I don't know. She has no children, so it's always just been her and my brother-in-law living in big houses. There was a rule at my job where only one of these 2 supervisors could be off at a time. One of them loved to take a full week off work during holidays to get more bang for his paid time off buck. One year, he had Thanksgiving week off, but the other supervisor had family come to town that week on late notice. The other supervisor asked him to cancel just one of his days so she could spend the day with family. He declined, even after she basically begged him, and he even said he didn't have anything to do that day. She then proceeded to take paid time off days every Wednesday of a holiday week for the next calendar year, effectively blocking him from taking his cheap weeks off. He told me that he thought it was funny because he knew she didn't have enough time to take all those vacation days off, and she'd eventually have to cancel some of them. I got to tell him, I hate to break it to you, but she only took 2 hours off each of those days. See, the rule didn't differentiate between a partial or whole day, so she only had to burn 24 or so hours to block him. He looked devastated. It was kind of petty on both of their parts, but I give her credit for being creative in her retribution and don't blame her a bit for what she did. My dad decided to retire due to some bullshit involving leave. He worked at a factory, and they would occasionally have mandatory weekend overtime if an order came in and it needed fast turnaround time. It was a poorly run shit show. He had a company credit card for when he'd make deliveries and learned to carry cash on him because it was hit or miss on whether or not the card would be declined. He'd been there for about 15 years, and I have no idea how he was as a worker, but he's the type to go in, do his job, and go home. No drama, complaining, or fuss. At the time, I lived far away but was visiting for a week. He asked his boss if he could be excused from weekend overtime if it came up because his son was in town and he didn't get to see him very often. He was told, if I tell you you're going to work this weekend, you better be there, or you might as well not show up on Monday because you'll be fired. He randomly retired within a year of that point. Just called in one Monday and said, I quit. I'm retiring. He didn't even tell my mom he was planning to do it. Having to tell people that they are literally smelling so bad they are excused from work to go home to shower and put on clean clothes. Then they can come back to work. More than once. To the same people. We hired a young kid, maybe 17 or 18, at an automotive repair shop I used to work at. He was new to the industry, but he wanted to learn and was a decently hard worker. He was shy and introverted and had some possibly slightly autistic tendencies, but he meant well. The kid was a little chubby, but not like grossly overweight. The biggest issue he had was that he constantly had that mildewy, sour rag smell about him. And not just like a whiff of it, it was extremely strong. Even wearing the shop-supplied uniforms that were dry cleaned every week, you could smell it on him. Well, one day, He finished a car and pulled it out front for the customer. She got into her car, then immediately got out and went inside and talked to the manager. Maybe 10 minutes later, after she left, the manager called him into the office. When they both came out, the kid's face was red like he had been crying. The manager later told us she had complained of the smell, so he asked the kid to be more mindful of his personal hygiene, and he even offered to buy him products like soap and deodorant if he needed. Turns out the kid had no living parents and stayed with his uncle, I think. His uncle was incredibly abusive and wouldn't let him use their washing machine or dryer for clothes. This kid was hand washing his clothes in a sink and trying to let them air dry for God knows how long. We don't know what he changed, but from that day on, he always came into work with no smell and maybe a light body spray scent. Poor kid, I hope he made it out of his abusive uncle's home quickly. My guess, the uncle was making him pay rent too, and he explained to his uncle, if I don't use the washer dryer, I'll lose my job and probably never can get another one with dirty clothes. And the uncle, wanting that sweet rent money, probably agreed and raised the rent. That uncle. I hope karma has something really nasty planned for him. It's always telling parents that their kid sucks at the sport they're doing. The parents drop and run and never see what the kids are doing at workouts, and then when the kid gets cut from the top team, they complain with shit like, but I dropped them off 6 times a week for the whole season, and I hit them with, I hate to break it to you, but turning up is not the same as actually working out. Honestly, the main reason why I haven't gotten into coaching youth football or basketball yet, I'd really like to, but even since my teenage sports years, I'm 31, I've noticed the parents who don't really understand the sport and what all it entails seem to be upset and dumbfounded when Billy or Susie rides the bench. Saw it when I played, seen it a lot more now I think, honestly. Parents think because they spent money off-season travel ball and all the gas, food, gear, etc. that comes with it. I genuinely think some of these parents act like they should be seeing a return on their time and money invested into their child's sport endeavors. I'm a certified public accountant and certified financial planner. I sat down with a friend's parents right before the pandemic about retirement. They had set up an IRA when they became a thing back in the 1970s and had been contributing to it regularly ever since. They didn't really understand the stuff, so they let their financial advisor handle the investments, but he had long since retired, so they wanted to sit down with me to go over their options. I looked at both their accounts and almost had a heart attack when I saw that all of their money in both IRAs were in money market accounts. They had been contributing to a retirement account all their working lives, but weren't actually investing the money. It wasn't growing with the market. It was certainly an oversight by their financial advisor, but they're self-directed accounts. It was their responsibility to manage them. Most people don't understand this. People assume the person who opened the IRA is sitting there monitoring their account, but they're not. Not unless it's a managed account that you're specifically paying a fee for that management. They did have Social Security and equity in their home, but without the investment money they were counting on, they just didn't have enough for the retirement they were originally planning on. I advised them both to continue working until they reached full retirement to maximize Social Security and minimize deductions from what they had, convert their basement into an apartment for the rental income, and consider a reverse mortgage. In the end, they did okay, but it was an extremely tough conversation to have with them. There was this regular guy at the bar. Middle-aged guy, very conservative, blue-collar, Blue Lives Matter type guy. He said some wild things sometimes and loved sharing his opinion often. Most people would call him out or just laugh him off. One day, he was talking about how terrible TikTok was. He started talking about TikTok is nothing but young girls dancing provocatively and how disgusting he thought it was. Everyone kind of just nodded along and said variations of, yeah, that's crazy, man. A little later, he left, and everyone in the bar just collectively looked at each other kind of stunned. It doesn't fit the prompt, technically, because nobody had the heart to tell him how algorithms worked, but it's a wild example of somebody inadvertently revealing themselves too much. My homie told us his Instagram is nothing but models and porn-type posts, and he was trying to explain to his girlfriend that it was just the way Instagram worked. He wasn't searching for them, they just pop up. He doesn't follow them or anything. Your girlfriend knows what you do when she's not around, bro, lol. You're not fooling her. Create a new fresh account on Instagram. See what the recommendations are. They for sure are models and porn-type posts. I downloaded TikTok once because my friend sent me a funny video of a guy doing impressions, and everything after that was just anime bimbo dances. I kept swiping past them, but it was incessant. I just deleted it because I don't want to have to train an algorithm already skewing to a bunch of tryhards in miniskirts. I once hired a line cook for my simple takeout deli that had way too good of a resume. He was leaving a trendy place in the city for my meat and cheese on bread establishment in the suburbs. He told me it was because he was moving and needed something close to home. I didn't dig into why he was willing to take a 40% pay cut. I was desperate for help. Dude shows up and crushes it day 1. Day 2, couple of fumbles, but strong lunch rush service. Day 3, he's a mess. Tells me it won't happen again, while being genuinely distraught that he couldn't hold down a 36-inch grill for 2 hours of medium-sized tickets. Day 4. This guy looks like he's rounding out a meth bender. He can barely stay on his feet, and I catch him sleeping in the back multiple times. I pull him aside and ask what's up. Is he fucked up on the job? Nope. Terminal pancreatic cancer at age 34. Guy was skipping his chemo to get hired. Once he went back on his treatments, he was so completely wiped out he couldn't work all day without passing out from exhaustion. Then he showed me a picture of himself from 6 months prior, and it really set in that this man had weeks left to live. He was literally half his former self in size. A big, muscled-up, tattooed sous chef wearing his whites on the line of a hot place in Center City. But there he was in front of me, gaunt, so pale his tattoos lost their color. I told him to go home and get some rest, and we would try again the next day. The next day came, and it was torture for me. I had to let him go. I was a 3-person operation in year 1.5 of business, and I was making 0 money. Every single day was critical for me to retain new customers and to make rent and payroll. It was me, the full-time cook, and a high school kid that helped me close. This cook position wasn't something I could carry on my back. I absolutely needed it to produce for me, or I would be out of business. We had a strong day. He had very few issues and was visibly feeling good about it. Then I followed him out to his car after his shift, and I laid it on him in private. It was intense. This was a guy that 6 months prior had every right to feel superior to me and my little deli operation. He immediately flashed anger, then acceptance, and then bargaining began. That's when I said something I still regret. I looked him right in the eye and said, "Don't beg me, man." I guess I wanted to end the conversation and came in hot on that one because I watched the fight disappear from his face. Just pure disappointment at his state of affairs. He was begging, and for a job beneath his talents. He shook my hand and left. I apologized, and he didn't respond. I googled his name a few months later just to see what may have happened. Well, it happened. His obituary was published about 6 weeks after his last day. I was his last employer, and I had fired him for dying on the job. I'm out of business now. COVID wiped me off the map. I have lots of lessons learned from my time hiring and managing and firing people, but that guy will probably always stick with me as a low point in letting capitalism dictate my life. He deserved better than what we as a society gave to him as just a cook. He never had good insurance, never had enough paid time off to get real treatment. In the end, he didn't even have the dignity of being with his family and not worrying about money for his final days. People shouldn't find out their life is over from some dickhead paying them $16 an hour to make sandwiches. Fuck, man. This one got me. It's a situation both of you deserve not to be in. Tough all around. But feel for that guy in particular. Definitely a tough situation all around. I don't think I'd be able to sleep at night over that one. It's 100% a society, funding, government issue at large. But having to make the choice, and that's what it is, to let someone so close to their deathbed down, and to be the one who gives the last, final, devastating piece of news to someone who's clinging to life would make me feel absolutely ghoulish for the rest of my days on Earth. Back when I was in the military working overnights on a watch floor, we had a guy who was way into doomsday prepping. Had elaborate plans, had tons of supplies and equipment, go bags, and so on. He would talk about it constantly, and really believed that there was going to be a nuclear war, and people like him would be left to guide the future of humanity. One day, he asked me what my nuclear survival plan was, and I told him that I was just planning on being dead. He seemed really confused by this, and I had to point out to him that an intercontinental ballistic missile would only take 20 to 30 minutes to reach its target, and given where we worked and lived nearby, was likely a top priority target. We were all going to die, likely before we even really knew what was happening, despite how much doomsday prepping anyone did. He was quiet for several days after that. I live in the same kind of place, close to a high-level laboratory. I don't even pretend that I'll survive if someone nukes it. I won't die instantly, sadly. It will be with radiation poisoning. People here keep thinking similar, that they can survive if they prep enough, but, honey, have you even looked at a map of a nuke's radius? I was out with my buddy at a karaoke bar. He'd been hyping himself up all week, convinced he was the next big thing in singing. Finally, his big moment came, and he picked Bohemian Rhapsody, the ultimate karaoke flex. He got on stage, lights dimmed, and the music started. He belted out the first few lines with so much confidence, but his voice, it was like a cat stuck in a vacuum cleaner. People started wincing. A few even left. When he came back to the table, still beaming, I had to break it to him. Man, I hate to say this, but I think Freddie Mercury just rolled over in his grave. He laughed at first, thinking I was kidding, but when he saw the bartender giving him free drinks out of pity, it sank in. I had a friend in college who had never watched The Office. He would tell everyone that many people compared him to Michael Scott, and he thought this was a good thing because, well, it seemed like Michael Scott was the main character, and he thought main character equals good. One day, I just sat him down to finally watch the show, and he got real sad.